It's a great thrill to be back in front of the academic community. My title today is the title of the conference, which is Storytelling at the Speed of Now. It's PR's Next Frontier. And I'm going to talk to you today about really a very fundamental evolution of the PR field. My speech a couple of years ago was a good one. Hopefully this one will be even more provocative. And I'm thanking Steve Rubel for working so hard with me on this the last 2 months. So yesterday, you heard in employee communications, you heard in social digital, and you heard in corporate reputation how our clients are embracing an always-on world, an always-ready approach to communication. Storytelling at the speed of now is deeply embedded in the DNA of public relations. While the story of a brand or company telling its story in its own voice in real time may sound new, it's really not. It's just an evolution of what we've been doing in PR for many years. What's different is the velocity and proliferation of channels. Today, ideas and content flows furiously at a pulse rate that the digital landscape demands. But that quickening does not change basic truths. We must never lose sight of the importance of quality storytelling, of a journalistic mindset, and of telling the truth. I repeat that, of telling the truth. There's too much content and not enough time. We are the guardians of truth. But I am now convinced more than ever that PR is poised to be a much more prominent discipline in marketing services. Before I get there, though, I want to talk about a few key trends that we're observing. Then I'm going to talk to you about the future of the industry, and then the future that your students, 5, 10, 20 years from now, are going to play in a world where a company like ours now has to seamlessly blend earned, owned, and paid content. And I'm going to close my remarks for ample time for questions. So, what's going on now? I'm going to give you an update since we last convened at Stanford in 2012. You may remember I had 3 asks for you as professors. 1, show and tell. Make sure that your students can do the visual part as well as the written part. Second, you have to prepare your students to create stories in 2 different styles. One that's rational and built for consumption. The other is emotional and built for sharing. And that's more social by design. Shorter form, again, more the show than the tell. Third, you have got to show data and insight. You've got to have infographics, you've got to have supporting element, and your work must be supported by insight. Your students have to understand the basics of statistics in order to understand research. So, look, there are some things that have stayed the same. President Obama is still president, he's still from Chicago. The Cubs are still terrible. But, look, I'd like them not to be terrible. I've waited my whole life for them not to be terrible. Yeah, really, I understand. But I'm telling you as professors that the pace of change is explosive. We at the agencies are impatient, and as an industry, we've got a lot more work to do. So I'm going to push you very hard today, and I'm going to talk to you about 3 trends that we're watching closely. The evolution of the media in the last 2 years. Notable changes in both editorial and advertising. 1, the press is moving towards an entirely new approach to editorial that reflects the outsized role that social media is playing in the discovery of content. Talk to your students. Where do they go? They do not go straight to media brands. They go to social and get referred to stories. They do not go direct to brands. That's a fundamental change to what Jerry Corbett and I do. We go to the New York Times or the Chicago Tribune. That's just the way we grew up. It doesn't happen anymore. With information finding us through the lens of our friends, articles are being repackaged into shorter, shareable, more mobile formats. Lists, quizzes, slideshows, explainers. It's not, folks, just at the born digital publications such as BuzzFeed. They may have started it, but the New York Times, USA Today, they are all on that bandwagon. Point 2, digital disruption is not just upending the editorial. It's also dramatically changing how the media makes money. Specifically, the expectation was always that this digital revolution was going to be great for the newspapers. We don't have to deliver dead trees anymore. Good. Don't have to pay those expensive drivers or those printing presses. Here's the flaw in the argument. The pressure put on ad prices by automated buying has caused the price for a digital ad to decline by 75% in the last 2 years. That has caused an absolute revolution in that you now see the lines crossing. There is more revenue from circulation than from advertising. Historically, it was 80-20. 80-20. Advertising, circulation. You could kind of give the paper away because you were going to make it back on advertising. It was the old razors and blades theory. You know that story. Make the money on the blades if you give away the razor. You can't do that anymore. That's why paywalls have come in. Now, very important statistic on paywalls. They appear to gradually be working. Reuters just did a study, said that 11% of Americans have paid for news, and another 11% would pay for news. The problem is, that's only 22%. And that's not enough to offset the decline in revenue from advertising. So, media owners are reinventing their business models. They are creating new revenue streams. Example, conferences. There are so many conferences now. Bloomberg, Vanity Fair, ties in with the Aspen Institute. I could go to a conference every week sponsored by a media company. The FT has 20 of them. But they're not just doing conferences. That's leading also to sponsored content. The reimagining of advertorial, product placement, custom publishing, under the bigger idea of native advertising. You'll hear from Lou Dvorkin later in this conference. Forbes has completely remade its business model based on native advertising. That is content that is of interest to the reader that goes alongside that which is produced on the editorial side. It is supplied by us in PR or by those at the corporation who are in marketing, and it's a very important and arguably as well read part of Forbes.com. And you have to understand that it is alongside. It is delineated, but it is given equal weight to that which is classic editorial. So editorial is starting to be delivered in ways that borrow what marketers do well, and advertising is starting to embody some aspects of what journalists do well, hence native advertising. You do see a church and state line still in place. There's a sort of yellow line that says this is native and this is, editorial. But these are blurred lines, folks, and it's just the new normal. Next key point, the evolution of the client role. We now observe that the responsibilities of the Chief Communications Officer and the Chief Marketing Officer are increasingly colliding and overlapping. In some corporations, this is causing CCOs to report to the CMO. But you definitely see, as Gary Sheffer mentioned yesterday, a overlap. What is causing this change? The public now demands that brands and corporations address societal needs. It's not just that you make money, it's that you do good. A good example of this, Mr. Swirling can tell us more. You know that 13 brands discontinued their relationship with the Los Angeles Clippers in the wake of that disgusting comment by Donald Sterling before the National Basketball Association acted. The brands were ahead of the league. It tells you everything. You'll also hear shortly about CVS Caremark's decision to stop selling tobacco. You'll hear later today about Gap's decision to raise wages in the stores for its workers. They did this without government. They did this because it was smart, because CVS Caremark wanted to be the leading provider of healthcare advice and products to its customers. It was contradictory to continue to sell tobacco, even if it was $2 billion in revenue. They figured they would make it more than that, and they have, actually, based on customer response to that action. Similarly with Gap, you'll attract better people to work for you in the company and in the stores. This set of examples creates the pattern for establishing trust with customers. Do the right thing, demonstrate leadership, put engagement and integrity ahead of making money, shared value. This is the new normal. But it definitely creates complexity in the worlds of the CCO and the CMO. Complicating this further is technology. A consumer doesn't differentiate anymore between an engagement with a company's call center or an interaction on Twitter. In fact, if the interaction with customer service is bad, what's the first thing he or she is going to do? Go on Twitter and say, man, Disney doesn't get it, or whoever. So this causes ambiguity over roles. Now, how is this being dealt with at the corporation? Let me give you an example at American Express. Leslie Berland was social media lead in public relations at Amex. She noted with the research team that card members were highly engaged in using social media to inform purchase decisions. Rather obvious. It led her to propose a partnership with Foursquare to allow Amex card members to redeem offers whenever they checked in with participating merchants. Not only was the program met with widespread praise, it took off like crazy and has been replicated on other social platforms. And today, she's been promoted from junior person in PR to head of digital partnerships, SVP, in charge of development, directing 8-figure marketing budgets. A PR person with a good idea who now is making it happen at Amex. Remember that. If tomorrow's PR professionals embrace the complexity and understand the world of the CCO, as well as being able to inspire the CMO with the ability to move the cash register, you have the chance to do what Leslie Berland has done at American Express. Third trend, the evolution of the PR firm. There's a dramatic shift in the marketing services landscape. And I want today to draw for you a little picture. Ron, do I have my pen?
It's supposed to be behind the screen.
Yeah.
Black. You got it. There it is.
Perfect. Here's my little teaching moment. I've been waiting for this for years. This is the box. PR is down here. PR does $4.4 billion for the top 10 firms. Box here is advertising. And that's $13.5 billion. My math is not, it's pretty good. This is media buying. That's about 10 billion. This is digital. That's about 10 billion. More on this in a minute. Okay, so the reason I'm giving you these stats will become evident in a moment. the key theme is we're all moving to a center. Not long ago, even 5 years ago, the swim lanes were very clearly defined. They didn't overlap. Today, it's completely different. Chief marketing officers don't care where the idea comes from. They don't put agency partners in boxes anymore. There's a boundary blurring, and it's a tremendous opportunity for us in PR to be provocative. So what's the future of the PR firm? Well, I've given you the stats. You can see them over my shoulder. Top 10 PR firms, $4.5 billion. You know, the ad agencies are 3x that. But there's a very interesting corollary statistic. Of the 4 categories last year, PR grew 4%, media buying grew 10%, digital grew about 6%, and advertising shrank 4%. Now, PR is never going to catch up in size with advertising, even if it grows at 4 or 5%, and the other grows and shrinks at 4 or 5%. But what I want to describe for you is an idea that I hope you can think about and help us to debate, explicate, and propagate. I could run for office based on that. I believe firmly that the era of marketing communications, in which classic orchestrated advertising leads the way, is now in its dotage. We actually see the emergence of a new paradigm, which is the era of communications marketing instead of marketing communications. Because in a world where storytelling at the speed of now is in full bloom, that is the approach that is necessary. I'm going to further construct the argument. The traditional definition of marketing actually goes back to Phil Kotler from Northwestern, 1959. He said, marketing is creating, delivering, and communicating value and managing customer relationships in a way that benefits the organization and its shareholders. I'm going to read that one more time. Creating, delivering, and communicating value to customers and managing customer relationships in ways that also benefit the organization and its shareholders. That's very profound. That's very deep. That is not transactional. That is not ring the cash register today. It is actually based on something that's really connecting to the consumer in a strong and long-term manner. I also want to talk to you about the word communications, because it's always been marketing up here and communications as a servant, communications as a channel, communications as a functional element. Marketing is the genius, communications as the cart. I disagree. Communications should lead. That's why this quote from Guy Kawasaki, who was the chief evangelist at Apple, is so appropriate. He says communications, the goal of communications is, quote, to provide information that moves people to action. I'll say it again. The goal of communications is to provide information that moves people to action. We believe that the market is beginning to understand that marketing communications has it backwards, because it stresses selling and image. It actually rewards the coordination and pushing of message in one direction. It's short term, and it's broken. It's a broken model. We believe in communications marketing because it is based on substantive storytelling. It's social by design. It has an intense focus on long-term and measurable business impact. It is relevant, substantive, based on stakeholder engagement, premised on trust, and above all, core to it is shared value for customers, organizations, and shareholders. So, my little picture, my goal, how this might work, I think that if today, this is the communications business, and this is all marketing. So marketing is, 3/4, more than 3/4. Marketing is, I don't know, what the sum of this is 23, 33, 40, I don't know, give or take. We're communications is, 10% of the total business right now. Our view should be 25 to 30%. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to have a new category. It's between. So in this new world, I'll draw a new picture. It's easier. So we have advertising. We have media buying. We have digital. And we have PR. And right now, again, communications, marketing is everything else. We want to think about this becoming this is comms, this is marketing, and we think communications marketing is in here. So that's the simple picture. Now, in effect, we at Edelman believe that we're already at the bleeding edge of the communications business. Our goal is to move into the suburbs. This is the city. This is the city. This is the suburbs. So think about that. We're going to annex Evanston. I don't know. Just a thought. Yes. So by carefully expanding into the suburbs, we're not expanding just the remit of public relations and creating career options for your students. We're actually going to change the mindset of marketers. Because at the core is the notion of a living brand. It means that a company or a brand has to be purposeful in how it acts, be attuned to multiple voices, be on 24/7, be social by design as opposed to by afterthought. And the perfect exemplar of this is a company you're going to hear from later, Starbucks. Starbucks has a clear brand platform. The 5 Ps that are classic in marketing, everyone understands who's a barista, the notion of their supply chain. They understand the importance of service. They understand storytelling at the core. They understand personal and human connection. Why did Howard Schultz have the idea of the wristband in 2009 that people could buy and help people who were out of work? It's because he bought into the American idea at the time. Why is it that Howard Schultz said we're not going to have guns in our stores? Because he's brave, because he's a leader, because he understands that companies have to connect to constituents in a different way. You're not just selling coffee, you're selling a relationship. And it actually is best exemplified by the announcement last week where he said, we're going to subsidize our baristas' tuition costs for college. It's just the ethos of Starbucks at work. It uses advertising as simply another channel. At the core is an idea and an ideal. It starts with the CEO, it's pulled through by the CMO and the CCO. Given that, there is a tremendous evolution of the role of the PR firm. Because of those 4 disciplines, uniquely, we are the only ones to lead with communications. The other three lead with marketing. And we have 3 words for you that we want you to consider as part of leading with communications. The first word is evolve. We believe that any company that wants to lead with communications has got to aspire to a continuous improvement in its brands, attaching itself to important social issues, and in one way or another, to product improvement. So, a good example of that, you heard from GE yesterday, manufacturing, talking about the core values of manufacturing in an economy, laying the base for, in fact, their acquisition of Alstom, creating a rationale. Similarly, Unilever, with the Dove campaign for real beauty. Any of you women who have daughters understand the power of that campaign in self-awareness and self-assessment. Then the second word is promote. And for us, it's promoting, but not promoting in the same way that an ad agency would. It's actually sparking conversations. It's creating demand on the basis of genuine, of experience, of taking user experience and talking about it broadly. And then third is protect. Again, uniquely among the options that you have as a client, the one that does protect is the PR firm. And it's the intellectually challenging work required to manage crisis, but it's also that what you have to do to reposition a company that has faced reputational attacks, such as Walmart, when they were 7 or 8 years ago under fire and have used their size and scale to be pioneers in ending food deserts in poor neighborhoods, or in becoming the leader on sustainability by insisting companies change their packaging or other. So, of course, in this era of the blurring of the lines, certain techniques remain vital. Media relations, community engagement, all these things that clients demand. But it's folded into this more holistic view of communications marketing. So that's a pretty bold assertion. I'm asking you to change the names of your curricula for next year instead of communications marketing. We'll just see how that goes with your students.
The business school. See how it goes with the business school.
Yeah, the business school too. Yeah, that could be a real hit with them. But I also, since I'm in front of 100 teachers, and I don't get to do this that often, I have 3 specific asks of you. And they're as follows. We've got to have new kinds of talent come into the PR business. We've got to equip the next generation of PR pros to be at least conversational and related disciplines. And last, you have to push yourselves to continue to embrace new ideas. You cannot stand still. So I'm going to get specific on each of these. In the last year, Edelman hired 1,700 people. 1,700 people around the world. Now, we had some attrition. I don't know, give or take 1,000 people left, but net new 700. Hello, Selma. But you know, I want to tell you some of the kinds of people we've hired, because it may amaze you. Adam Hirsch, who you'll hear from during this conference. He was COO of Mashable. Chris Paul joined from Publicis Vivaki. He built the digital advertising trading platform for Vivaki. Tyler Gray, whom you met yesterday with the hair. He came from Fast Company, and he ran the Fast Company newsroom. Glenn Engler, who is my right-hand man, and was president, what was your title at Digitas, give or take? President. Okay. I sort of remember. Largest digital firm. So we're onboarding all sorts of kinds of specialists who do not come from the classic PR mold. They do not necessarily know how to write a press release or develop a media strategy, but I'll tell you what they do know, which many of you may not, and I know less about. Interface design, ad tech, analytics, audience planning. I'm just curious, how many of you teach any of that? Okay, 2 years from now when I come back and ask you the same question, you're going to have all the hands up. Because here's what we need. Here's what we need from you. Developers, analysts, planners, who can be paired with those of us, like me and like many of you, who come from a journalism background and who are brilliantly creative because we come up with ideas in the shower. That's good. Not enough anymore. Sorry. Anyway, please also don't just teach the kids who come to you. Go and recruit those who can come into your major. Go shopping in the, people who are taking statistics or taking foreign languages or whatever and say, you really should come over to the PR faculty because, we're the ones who are working with S.E. Johnson on trying to sell malaria nets in developing countries, and it's a really complex problem, and we really don't know how to work with government to do that. And, we really need smart people who, speak Arabic or, like this, okay? Now, next. Specifically, I want you to tell me that you are sending us people with a base level of fluency in search engine optimization, social community management, digital advertising, content strategy, videography, and analytics. And these students have got to come to us with a results orientation. They have to understand metrics. They have to get it. They cannot be taught this. They have to get it. Because in fact, they're going to be the ones who are going to have to teach the rest of us. This is a key point, folks. The people you are bringing to us are going to inform the people who are 30 years old. All right? That's the change. That's the difference. That's why it's so important that you do this. Business metrics matter. You cannot any longer say, well, we had 50 clips. Who cares? It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. I'm sorry. PR generalists will still be in demand. Yes, we'll still hire a bunch of those. But we've got to have more specialists. Lastly, you professors have got to get out more. I'm serious. I want you to be out in the community in Omaha or wherever you're from to try your ideas. Don't sit in your offices and write papers in order to get tenure without, no, hold on, this is important. This is important. You should get tenure by doing papers that are based on actual work in the field. I didn't think that was a clap line, but I had other clap lines that didn't work. That's a good one. Well, it's exactly right. I took the chance. Look, when you go out in the field, and I suggest actually, you send your kids out, students out to, be it local PR firms or whatever it is. You should do the same thing. Actually. And, you should kick the tires on your own ideas. And you should encourage not just your students, but yourselves to try things and fail. Because until you fail, you do not run hard enough or ski hard enough. And again, I just tell you that the ethos of our clients who are succeeding are clients who are willing to take some risk. And, GE led in employing Afghan and Iraqi war veterans. They said, these people are coming back with no jobs, and we're going to create a job equivalence. So if somebody was a helicopter mechanic or something, that's the equivalent of a engineering degree for us. That's a big idea. Hundreds of veterans have been employed on that basis. I get that academia doesn't necessarily move at the same pace as corporations. But what I'm telling you is this idea of brave, and communications marketing, it can't wait. You have got to accelerate ideas and create an environment where ideas can flourish and failure can be tolerated and encouraged. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want to close today in a sentimental way because in about 2 hours we're going to dedicate a street sign to my mom, who passed away in October, at the corner of Astor and Goethe, where they lived for 45 years. And my dad passed away in January 13, and my mom passed away in October. So to say it was a terrible year for me would be about right. Yeah. And what I would tell you is, as a human being, you really don't completely understand your world until you've had to suffer. And I've been fortunate. I never really suffered much. You know, I had my parents a long time, prospered in business, had kids, family. But I learned a lot by that. But I also learned just by talking to my parents as they were ebbing, the wisdom that comes with people who have age and who have experience. And the line that I always remember from my dad, we at some point 3 years ago became the largest PR firm. His immediate response to me was, "Son, it's great to be the biggest PR firm, but we must always strive to be the best PR firm." And that, for me, is everything, because in the end, it's the values that you will impart to your students of integrity, honesty, quality, and commitment that will make the difference. Whatever technologies you teach them pale in importance to the kind of old school Dan Edelman approach to how you live your life well. And he lived his life well, and so did my mom. So I want to thank you for this. I'm happy to take as many questions as you want. And I have 4 minutes, is what you're saying? So I talked a lot longer than I thought I would. Yes, sir.
Mr. Edelman, you were the first.
You can call me Richard.
Okay.
My dad's Mr. Edelman.
You're the first PR head that I've heard talk about Cannes, and I'm curious. I've been bringing students there for a study abroad festival to the Cannes Lions. What role do you think PR should play in our education by looking into advertising turf as a way to extend that boundary?
Well, I'm really thrilled that Edelman was the first PR firm to win a Cannes Lion last week. Some mom will attest that I actually was dressed in revolutionary style. I wore a black shirt, black pants. It was really crazy. He said, "What happened to you?" I don't know. I showed up in Cannes. I didn't want to embarrass myself. But the most important thing that I learned from watching the other winning entries is the ad people do things very simply and very visually. And the stories we tell are too complex. We've got one way and another. I'm not arguing against complexity. I embrace complexity as part of the advantage that public relations has. But when we want to win awards, you know, one story that I'll just tell you is a Guatemalan ad agency won an award in the PR Lions because they came up with a song that was about trying to stop people from texting while driving. And it was taught for little kids, and it was, you know, da-da-da-da, and then blam. And so they would go home to their moms and go, da-da-da-da, blam. And mom would say, "Well, what's the blam for?" "Oh, that's when you have a collision with your car." And that's a marvelously simple idea, and it's a great idea. But that's what we should aspire to. And we can do that. And in fact, the work we did for Chipotle on the Scarecrow campaign was a terrific exemplar. The Scarecrow leads a rebellion against, you know, factory food and all this other. And it's a film that, you know, it's a short form film that people share. And oh, there I am. See, someone? He saw it. It actually happened. I dressed in black. No tie. I was born in a tie. Anyway. Okay, next question. Yes, yes.
Richard, I have not necessarily a question, but a proposal for you.
Oh.
Your ideas are fabulous, and 2 years ago, I was able to do a Planck Center Fellowship and worked for Harley Davidson. And it was great to get back into a corporate setting for a couple of weeks and to see where my skills were in terms of the corporate. They were better than I thought they would be after 10 years of being out. But I was able to bring all of that dramatically back into the classroom. And I'm wondering if Edelman would consider, since you have offices all around the world, of maybe taking professors for a summer or part of the summer and letting us work in that environment.
Deal, done.
Thank you.
If you want to do that next summer, tell me. Done. We'll pay you nicely.
Expect my resume.
Good. Any others?
A couple of really quick questions. Where do you see the role of nonprofit organizations and corporations in this new formulation of the power of PR? Do you see any differences?
I see a tremendous opportunity for NGOs in this new world because corporations need the credibility and trust that nonprofits bring. And our trust barometer shows that in almost every country in the world, NGOs have a 15, 20-point advantage over corporations. And so the partnership with a UNICEF or with others is going to be invaluable for brands, especially.
And the second quick question is about sponsored content,
Yeah.
because I think this is probably the most dramatic shift, in traditional PR. Is it advertorial? Is it feature? Is it news with the or is it all of that?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
And I think it's a matter of you negotiating with the media company in such a way that you get what you need that's adjacent to the earned content or whatever. Other questions? Yes.
I just wanted to say that, the speech from 2 years ago from Stanford, the branded, owned, earned, that whole sort of thing, it's so fascinating to me how it's changed so much. And so it's interesting because I used to be against teaching advertising because I said it's too easy for my students. And I just wanted to say that this conference has really changed my perspective of that. So this year we had students that did presentations that included all of those elements, and it was judged by outside agencies, and they all complimented the approach. So I just wanted to say that you have such an impact beyond this conference, and so it's great.
Well, the book. Kevin.
I'm just wondering, because it seems to be a big part of the value you can offer, particularly under the new model, is that communication is a two-way street, and you are bringing a lot of data and a lot of analysis back to the clients. Have you, as you start on this with your own clients, are you finding them responsive? Are they able to kind of to understand the paradigm shift and accept the added value, or how's that working in terms of your clients?
It's working completely. I mean, I'll give you an example. McGraw-Hill Financial, so they own Standard & Poor's. One of the questions in the wake of the financial crisis is how do we represent the brand? And so we had done 3 or 4 years of sort of salon dinners and one-on-ones and trying to work the mainstream media. At some point we said, look, we think we have to do a ad campaign for you. But it's the people of S&P. And it talked about individuals and the quality of the person who came from Columbia Business School or whatever, and it told a story which we then supported in free media and made so the ability to sort of test that proposition with particularly their clients was critical. But it was the kind of thinking that you start with free or earned, and then you work to paid but supported by earned, which you in politics understood years ago. That's the same model. Yeah.
Richard, one more.
One more question.
Hi, Richard. Jonathan Anastas. I'm a client of yours.
Oh, good.
I've got a question about your box.
Yes.
So I completely agree with it philosophically. Here's one of the things we struggle with a client of where that box is going. So I'm going to give you an example. So our struggle is everybody, all of our agency partners want to live in the middle of that box. And so we are sometimes in a situation where, I won't use any agency names, where the advertising agency is not focused on really delivering the best TV idea, they're working on the viral idea. And the media agency shows up with YouTube influencers, there's not really a media plan. And the PR agency is focusing on the viral idea. And the digital agency is like, I don't really want to focus on the website, I want to focus on the viral idea. Because everybody thinks they want to live in the middle of the box. how do you sort of get everything you need to get done and manage kind of swim lanes as everybody moves to the middle?
So, look, I'm not a client, but if I were, what I would say is, you've still got to, you know, cover the core job, which is, you know, in our case, press relations or, you know, whatever, blogger relations. And if you also have an idea that is really important, bring it. You can do that in conjunction with, but you know, it has to be a plus, as opposed to shifting the core. I assume you'll mention this shortly somewhere. But make sure everybody does his or her job. It's a bit like managing a football team or soccer team. You know, quarterback still has to hand the ball off to the running back. You know, that's important. Can't
Sure,
just
I just think everybody's afraid that their job makes them look 20th century. You know what I mean?
No, but I think that's really important that you say, here's the basis on which you're hired, you do your core job, and if there are other ideas that are additive, do that. And, you know, we've had this for Kellogg, for instance. It's OG, you want me to stop? I didn't.
I know people would love to have you talk for another couple hours, but you will be around.
I'll be around for dinner. We can talk
So,
more. Anyway,
I think
thanks.
we're gonna keep going, so thank you, Richard.